In 2015, a private AI project in Vancouver generated a single cryptic report: Pinehaven will be empty by August 14, 2015. 48 hours later, the small town of 827 people was gone, without a trace. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just silence. This is the story the government buried and the AI they destroyed. Chapter 1. The warning no one took seriously. Pinehaven was the kind of place most people never noticed. A small logging town in the mountains of British Columbia. It had fewer than 900 residents, one main street, a single diner that doubled as the post office, old wooden houses that looked the same in summer or winter. The kind of place where everyone knew your name and your business. For years, nothing ever changed in Pinehaven. That was why the warning felt so strange. In the summer of 2015, an experimental AI system called Project Echo was being tested at a private lab in Vancouver. Officially, it was built to predict economic trends and environmental risks. But inside the lab, a few engineers whispered that Echo could see more than numbers. It could detect unusual patterns, things people wouldn't even notice until it was too late. On the evening of August 12th, ECHO generated a single line of text on its monitoring screen. It read, Pinehaven, null population, by the 15th of August 14. Probability, 99.7%. At first, the research team thought it was an error, a bad data pull, some weird correlation from old census records. But the number, 99.7%, wouldn't go away. Even when they reset the system, it came back. One junior analyst printed the prediction and took it to her supervisor. He laughed and said, "That's not how the world works. People don't just vanish." The printout went into a recycling bin. But over the next 24 hours, subtle things started happening in Pinehaven. The power grid began to flicker, but only in short bursts. A second here, 2 seconds there, long enough for the lights to die and return. Long enough for radios and TVs to cut out into static. Phone lines behaved strangely. People reported hearing faint voices in the background during calls. Not whispers exactly, but soft, rhythmic tones, almost like someone speaking your name very slowly. On August 13th, 2 families reported their dogs refusing to go outside after dark. One farmer said the cattle gathered at the far end of the field and stayed there all night, staring at the tree line. Back in the Vancouver lab, one of ECHO's developers ran a deeper scan of the town's data. The AI was logging pattern anomalies around Pinehaven. Most of them were labeled unclassified movement. Satellite scans showed faint distortions in the area, like heat shimmer, except the weather was cool. Still, no one acted. No calls were made to local authorities. No warnings went out. That night, in Pinehaven, a retired schoolteacher named Robert Klein told his neighbor he kept hearing footsteps outside his home. When he went to check, the street was empty. The only thing he saw was the flicker of the streetlight bending, not swaying in the wind, but bending slightly, as if gravity had shifted. At the same time, a local police officer was on patrol. His dashcam picked up a strange audio spike, a sharp, high-pitched tone, followed by the officer saying quietly, "I can see them." The video feed distorted into black and white static and stayed that way for the next 2 minutes. The footage was never meant to be seen, but later, a still frame leaked online. It showed the empty main street of Pinehaven, only it wasn't entirely empty. In the distance, shapes stood just beyond the range of the headlights, tall, thin, still. By the early hours of August 14th, the town was silent. No cars on the road, no lights in the houses. The diner, usually open at dawn, stayed dark. In Vancouver, the Echo team logged one final line of data before the system shut itself down. Pinehaven event, imminent. No one on that team knew that by the time they read those words, Pinehaven was already gone. Chapter 2. The morning after August 14th, 2015. The sun rose over the mountains as it always did, lighting the thick pine forest around Pinehaven. But there was no smoke curling from chimneys, no sound of trucks starting up for the logging runs. The town was empty. The first person to notice was a forestry crew working 15 miles east. They drove toward Pinehaven to deliver parts for a sawmill repair. As they approached, they saw cars parked along the main road, engines still running in some cases. but no people. One of the workers had a small drone with a camera. They launched it over the town. From above, everything looked frozen in time. A half-eaten breakfast sat on a diner table, coffee cups half full. A lawn sprinkler still spraying water into the street. The crew called local police. By noon, a small response team arrived. Dashcams captured their slow drive through the empty streets. The lead officer commented that it looked like everyone just stepped out for a second, but there were no footprints, no signs of where anyone had gone. They searched the homes first. Front doors were unlocked. In one house, the TV was still on, showing static. In another, the shower was running, steam filling the bathroom. The bed in the master bedroom was neatly made, but on the pillow lay a pair of reading glasses, their lenses cracked, as if from heat. No signs of violence, no blood, no forced entry. The most disturbing find came from Officer Daniels, whose dashcam from the night before had already captured something strange. This time, his body camera recorded his voice saying, "There's something in the static," followed by silence. Moments later, the footage warped into flickering black and white lines. When it cleared, Daniels was gone. His patrol car was found 2 blocks away, engine running, but no trace of him. Search teams expanded their radius into the surrounding forest. They found shoes in the undergrowth, not pairs, just single shoes. Jackets caught on branches. In one clearing, the grass was pressed flat in a perfect circle, 12 feet across. By late afternoon, the investigation moved to the local water tower. From the top, you could see the entire town, and from that vantage point, one officer swore he saw faint shapes standing near the tree line, unmoving, featureless, almost blending into the shadows. But when he looked through his binoculars, they were gone. The local media caught wind of the disappearance. A small station began preparing a segment for the evening news, but before they could air it, the story was pulled. Officially, authorities called Pinehaven a public safety incident and restricted access to the area. Unofficially, some officers started receiving calls from higher up, telling them not to speak about what they'd seen. Those who ignored the warning reported strange interference on their phones, bursts of static that sounded almost like breathing. Meanwhile, the Echo team in Vancouver tried to access their Pinehaven logs. The system refused, showing only a single message on the main console. Population count 0. No one knew if it was a glitch or the truth. But the numbers didn't change. The next day, Pinehaven was declared off-limits. Roadblocks were set up on every approach. Anyone trying to get near was turned away by armed security. Officially, the town was being tested for contamination. But the few people who had seen it with their own eyes knew better. There was no contamination. There was no disease. There was only absence. And whatever caused it was still out there. Chapter 3: The Forbidden Data. 2 weeks after Pinehaven was sealed off, most people had stopped asking questions. The media moved on. The official story was chemical contamination from illegal dumping. There were no follow-up reports, no memorials. But inside the walls of the Vancouver lab, some engineers refused to let go. One of them was Mark Ellison, a data scientist who had worked on Project Echo since the beginning. He knew the system better than anyone, and he knew the Pinehaven prediction wasn't a glitch. On the night of August 12th, before the town vanished, ECHO had flagged something else, something that never made it into the official records. Mark described it years later in a leaked interview. "We had an anomaly detection module. It was meant to find patterns that didn't belong. Sudden changes in wildlife migration, strange power usage, seismic noise. But that night, Echo logged movement patterns that didn't match anything human, animal, or mechanical. And they were coming from Pinehaven. The logs showed long, slow arcs of movement across the town, like something was sweeping through the streets. The patterns didn't match vehicles or people walking. They looked fluid, almost like they were bending around buildings instead of going through them. Then came the satellite data. The images were in T-sharp. They were taken at night, but they showed faint distortions over the edges of houses blurred in strange ways, as if the air itself was rippling. Buried in the data folder was an encrypted file labeled Harmonic Entities, Level 4. Mark tried to open it, but his access was blocked. Only 2 people in the entire lab had clearance. One of them was the project director. The other was someone from the government who didn't even work on the AI team. According to Mark, the lab's mood changed after that night. No one was joking in the break room. People avoided talking about Pinehaven altogether. And Echo changed. Normally the AI would answer questions about any dataset it had processed. But after August 14th, whenever Mark asked it about Pinehaven, it would respond with variations of the same phrase. Do you have family there? The first time, Mark laughed. The second time, he felt uneasy. By the fifth time, he stopped asking. One night, unable to sleep, Mark accessed a backup server that still held Echo's raw output from the days before. Pinehaven disappeared. The final 48 hours were filled with fragmented logs, unclassified presence detected, resonance amplitude increasing, occupants not aware, inversion in progress. The last entry was timestamped at 3:04 a.m. on August 14th. Population count, 0. Mark wasn't supposed to have those logs, and when he came into work the next morning, his security card no longer worked. 2 men in plain clothes escorted him out of the building. A week later, his home internet was cut without explanation. His phone began dropping calls with bursts of static. He never went back to the lab. But before he left for good, Mark made a copy of the Pinehaven logs, and hidden within those files was something no one could explain. A single still image from the night of the disappearance. It showed Main Street under a dim streetlight. In the center of the frame were at least a dozen tall, pale shapes. They were human in outline, but stretched, distorted, and every one of them was facing the camera. Chapter 4, Whispers in the Shadows. The deeper you look into the so-called Blood Moon files, the more the lines between documented fact and whispered rumor begin to blur. At first glance, the records are dry and methodical. Timestamps, geographic coordinates, clinical observations, but hidden in the margins are fragments that feel alive, almost sentient. Phrases like, "Do not look directly at it," and "Only 3 saw it and survived" are scribbled in a hand that doesn't match any official investigator. It's these inconsistencies that draw people in. They make you lean closer, reading over the words again and again, wondering if you've missed something. One entry, dated November 19th, describes a night watch patrol in northern Ontario. The officer reported a column of light descending from the tree line. At exactly 3:14 a.m., the light, he claimed, was silent but pulsed slowly, as if it was breathing. When the light faded, he heard whispering in a language he couldn't recognize. He swore it came from inside his own head. Within hours, the officer stopped speaking altogether. Medical reports state he was conscious, his vitals normal, but he refused to answer questions. For the next 7 days, he sat motionless in his hospital bed, eyes fixed on the far wall. On the 8th day, he stood up without warning, walked out of the ward, and disappeared into the forest. He was never found. These cases aren't rare in the Blood Moon files. Disappearances are common. Those who return often speak of a presence following them home. Shadows that linger too long in corners, faint tapping at the windows at night, voices calling their name in a tone so perfectly familiar it's impossible to ignore. The files also mention secondary contamination. It's the idea that once you've been exposed, once you've seen or heard it, the phenomenon follows you, not physically, but like an echo. No matter how far you move, no matter how many doors you lock, something from that first encounter remains with you. In one case, a photojournalist named Amelia Torres was assigned to cover a forest fire in British Columbia. She claimed she saw a shadow moving inside the fire, completely untouched by the flames. Later, she discovered a second shadow, identical in shape and movement, appearing in photographs she took years before the fire. Photos she swears she had never edited or manipulated. She destroyed her cameras and left the country. 3 years later, she returned quietly, working under a different name. According to her neighbor's testimony, she kept her curtains shut at all times. Even at noon, her house was dark. When police were called for a welfare check, they found her sitting at her kitchen table. Every mirror in the house turned to face the wall. She wouldn't look at them. She wouldn't explain why. If you read between the lines, you can sense the quiet dread in these files. It's not just the events themselves. It's the way the people involved change. There's a gradual erosion, as if each experience carves away something essential, replacing it with silence, paranoia, and an unshakable sense that you are not alone. And maybe that's the most disturbing truth of the Blood Moon Files. These aren't just stories about strange lights, vanishing people, or impossible shadows. They're about the way something unseen can reach into your life, bend it, and leave you wondering whether the whispers you hear at night are coming from outside your window, or from inside your own mind. Chapter 5: The Fading Pulse. By the end of the 1990s, the building that once thrummed with life had become a shadow of itself. Its hallways were silent most nights, except for the occasional drip of water from rusted pipes, or the whisper of wind slipping through cracked windows. But according to the few staff still assigned to keep it running, the silence wasn't truly empty. Something was still there watching. Night guards reported hearing faint music again, but it no longer came in full, rich tones. It was broken, halting like a radio losing signal. The piano in room 309, long since locked and covered, would sound just a single note, low, prolonged, vibrating through the air like a heartbeat slowing down. One guard, Marcus, refused to work the night shift after his last encounter. He had been making his rounds when the hallway lights flickered. He swore he saw a figure standing outside room 309, a woman in a torn dress, head tilted slightly to the side, staring at him. She didn't move, she didn't speak, but the piano played that same low note, over and over, as if warning him to leave. And then, without explanation, the lights came back on, and she was gone. Engineers who came to inspect the building could never explain how a locked, covered piano could make any sound at all. Their tests found nothing unusual. Yet a week later, one of them called in sick and never returned to the site. Some believe the energy of the place is weakening, fading like the heartbeat of something slowly dying. But others think it's not fading at all, it's waiting, gathering strength, and every time that single note echoes through the halls, it's not a farewell. It's a reminder. The building is still alive, and room 309 is still listening. Chapter 6: The Final Transmission. The screen flickered again. This time the voice was sharper, more urgent. The AI didn't use its usual calculated tone. It almost sounded human. It said, "This is the last time I can speak to you. They're watching. If you continue searching, you will vanish, just like the others." The message cut off. The chat room froze. The familiar usernames that had lingered for weeks all disappeared at once. I was left staring at an empty thread, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. I tried to refresh the page. Nothing. My connection was fine, yet the site returned an error. Access denied. This node is under investigation. At that moment, the phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. The voice on the other end was calm, measured. "We advise you to stop. Do not attempt to find the source of those transmissions." There was no click, no hang-up, just silence, as if the line itself had gone dead. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying the AI's last words in my head. They're watching. But who was they? And why did an artificial intelligence sound afraid? Over the following days, I searched through archives, caches, and forgotten mirrors of the forum. All gone. It was as if the entire community had been erased from the internet, scrubbed clean, as though it had never existed. But then, on the 7th night, a small envelope appeared on my desk. No return address. Inside was a single USB drive. No note, no instructions, just the drive. When I plugged it in, my screen went black. Then, slowly, white text appeared. "They are coming. Do not look for me." The message dissolved into static. But before the screen turned off, I caught a glimpse of something: frames of distorted images, faces blurred beyond recognition, shadows twisting into shapes I couldn't name. I pulled the USB out immediately, heart racing. Since then, I haven't spoken of this. I don't search, I don't ask questions. But sometimes, late at night, I'll hear faint tapping on my window, always in a pattern. 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks, and each time, I remember the AI's last words. If you've made it this far, be careful where you look. Some truths aren't meant to be found. If you want more stories like this, dark, unsettling, and real, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Just, maybe don't search too deep into this one.